Ursula Hudson joins me now. She is the president of the Slow Food Germany movement. You're a food researcher and author, Ursula, and I know you're going to be talking to the forum today. What will be your main message?
The main message will be that we have to start with new thinking. We cannot address all the problems we have. We cannot address a coherent approach to the complexity of the 17 SDGs if we do not employ new thinking, if we are not prepared to work together as a society, which includes, of course, the private sector, which are farmers in there as well, of course, then policies and the civil society. And only together, actually, we can address this. And we need a lot of new thinking rather than old thinking.
What kind of new thinking would you suggest? Because we've talked at the forum before where agriculture meets environment. Now we're talking about the consumer behaviour, societal pressure, and all of those things have crept in as not just an add-on but an essential part of the debate.
Yes. I mean, if we look at the current situation of the dominant model of food production, which is basically the agribusiness model, at least in Europe, because farming is not farming, then it has brought us into a rather dire situation. There is no doubt about that. In the light of the two SDGs that are approached here, particularly the number 2 about eradicating hunger, but also, and that hasn't been mentioned so far in the conference, actually finding ways of setting up sustainable farming and food production for slow food, if I may say that. Sustainability goes back to the original Brundtland definition, so it's not only ecological and economical, it's also very strongly social, cultural and political for stabilities. If we have these 5 together, this is quite a challenge. That is the one thing. And if we look at the number 12, the consumption, the sustainable consumption, then we need to address first the current model. Has the consumer actually the ability to source sustainable food from probably a not sustainable production system? And how do we deal with that? So we will ask and say, as Slow Food and other NGOs, let's put the current cap. Europe should be leading, we have heard in this. We have heard earlier, let's put the current cap under the REFIT program and let's assess whether it actually is efficient, effective, whether it meets actually the consumer demands or the European citizen demands. It's still fully funded, 40% of the EU budget, and let's see what we come to. And if Slow Food prolongs this, then we would say we have to go and strive, and that is new thinking, radical new thinking, for a EU common sustainable food policy rather than agri-policy, energy, consumer, health and so on. So out of the silos, as it was mentioned earlier.
It's been one of the common themes today because when you look at those silos and you look at the old definition of intensification, you know, all of this thinking is changing, not least because our minds are quite focused by climate change. What would be next steps? What would be progress from the sort of the messages that you're hearing at the forum today? What would represent progress for you?
Progress would be diversification. Diversification of food systems, diversification of markets, diversification of agro-biodiversity in itself, very, very strongly necessary because we have reduced the gene pool in terms of plants we eat and animals we eat massively. Progress would also be finding ways of reducing cheap meat consumption and addressing the true cost problem.
Italy are doing quite well at looking at waste targets, for example, although I read that there is now a Starbucks about to open in Milan, so, you know, yes. Good and bad news from your point of view, Ursula.
In terms of diversification and more variety in everything, it's very bad news, and that actually is probably a business of the past, I hope.
Talk to me a little bit then finally about, food having lost its value and how you change that sense, because talking about smallholders, talking about local cooperatives, talking about cultural norms of food, these are the kind of noises that are being made in the forum now, and the debate has moved on. Are concrete steps really happening though? Action and now has been one of the themes so far today.
On the grand scale, I can't see it really yet. We have great statements by the UNEP, but I can't see that much action coming from it. Action is coming actually from civil society and from courageous and responsible enterprises. So it's still more the grassroots side that pushes the agenda, that pushes also the excuse me, the political agenda, and we are very happy about the commitment to the SDGs because that puts a level on top on the political side. And so grassroots engagement, civil society engagement and political engagement can meet in addressing those targets and challenges.